Hello and welcome to this video. So in this video, I'll have a look at the mega cap tech stocks: Tesla, Apple, Microsoft, NVDA, Amazon, Meta, Google, AMD, and Netflix. I'll look at the current trends. What are some of the levels we should be paying attention to? So let's get started. So starting off with Tesla. So if you look at the Tesla's weekly, so this is the weekly chart. You can clearly see that it has now started a new uptrend. It has broken this downtrend. It had made a series of weekly lower highs, but that sequence has been broken once this level has been taken out. So you can see from here to here, we have a weekly higher high, and then we also have a weekly higher low. You can also see that the weekly moving averages, that weekly 20 and 50 moving averages, they've now crossed. They're now beginning to move higher. This would be quite similar to, let's say, right here, when they crossed and they started to move higher. So long as the moving averages start to move higher, this would be positive, and the bias definitely would be to the upside. If we look at the momentum indicators, you'll see that the RSI is comfortably above the 50 level and rising. MACD is above the zero line and rising. So both the price action, moving averages, momentum indicators look positive to me, and there's nothing that suggests that we should expect any crash and burn in Tesla shares. Now that said, Tesla reports earnings next Wednesday. Now I have no idea how the stock will react after the earnings announcement. So keeping that aside, if I purely simply look at the price action and the momentum indicators, I'm not seeing anything that's cause for concern. Now, can Tesla pull back and create a weekly higher low, having formed a higher low right here? Can it do something like this? Absolutely possible. Is that going to create any technical damage? Not at all. As long as weekly RSI remains above 50, I would expect any sort of pullback to be temporary. And this pullback would also be within the context of this uptrend. So that's how I would view, any sort of pullback. Now, if I move to the daily time frame on Tesla, so on a daily time frame also, I see, strong move to the upside. You can see series of higher low, this being the latest one. So price action looks positive to me. Even on a daily basis, you can see that the daily 20 and 50 EMAs are moving higher. It recently came to, close to the daily 20 EMA. So these two are going to provide dynamic support on any kind of pullback. Now, MACD remains above the zero line and RSI above 50. So those are also positive. Now, you might say that RSI is making a lower high, MACD is moving lower. Isn't that creating a negative divergence? Yes, it is, but this is just one data point. Sometimes what you see is that these averages, these indicators, they could kind of move lower while the stock trades sideways, and these negative divergence then gets resolved. So since this is just one data point in relation to the others, so I'm not so concerned about the negative divergence yet. So let's have a look at some of the levels we should be paying attention to. So to do that, I'm looking at the hourly chart so we can clearly see the levels. So since forming this low right here, this is 265. So Tesla rallied to this level, 275. So this is 275. You can see the 275 was a previous area of support. So Tesla paused for a short period of time, then took out this level and rose all the way to 285. So if there is further pullback, I would expect first level of support to be at 275, and the next level to watch is this 265 level. So those will be the two levels. And on the upside, obviously 285, which was the most recent high, and above that, the next level to watch would be this level right here, which is, let me just zoom it out so you can see. It's between 300 and 310. you can see there was quite a bit of interaction in this zone right here. So this zone is between 300 and 310. So if Tesla is able to break out 285, then I would expect the next level I would be looking out for would be between 300 and 310. So the levels on the downside, 275 first and 265. Now the 265, if you look at on a daily basis, also where the this is 265, this, you see this candle right here, the daily 20 EMA is also at that level. Right now the daily 20 EMA is at 263, but it's rising, so it's going to come close to this level. So there's confluence of support around the 265 level. So I would keep an eye on that level if there's any further pullback. So that's Tesla. Now let's have a look at Apple next. So on an so let me just remove the moving averages. Now if you look at Apple, you can see that Apple has been trading inside this channel right here. So the upper end of this channel, most recently it reached the upper end of the channel, pullback. It's now close to the lower end of the channel, which has acted as a support previously. So overall, as long as it stays inside this channel, there's really not much to say. It is positive, and I would expect further move to the upside. The question is, what happens if it falls below the lower end? Okay, fine. If that's the case, let's explore some of the levels. So if I bring in the moving averages, you can see that the daily 20 EMA, the green line, has acted as support previously. Support, 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 support. Even most recently, last week, we see the daily 20 EMA has provided support. Now, I would expect the daily 20 EMA to, but what happens if it breaks below? Well, if it breaks below this level, then obviously we have this level and eventually the 50 EMA. You see, it hasn't touched the 50 EMA for a while. The previous time was back in March of this year. So even if it pulls back to this level, is that the end of it? In my opinion, no, because as long as then I have to look at the weekly chart. On a weekly basis, I have to see what's happening on a weekly time frame. As long as weekly RSI remains above 50, any kind of pullback in Apple, even if it's to the 50-day moving average, to me is temporary. Meaning, even if it does that and consolidates, I would expect it to move higher. Because you have to first see whether or not technical break on a daily time frame. If there is, then you look at the weekly basis. If you see that there is no technical damage on a weekly basis, meaning the momentum indicators are positive, price action is positive, MACD is positive, then I would expect any kind of weakness to be temporary in nature. Because we've got earnings coming up over the next couple of weeks, not just from Apple but other tech stocks. That's likely to have some impact on the market. But the question is, now since the daily time frame is a little bit more volatile than the weekly time frame, so if I see technical damage on a daily time frame but not on a weekly basis, then as I said, I would expect any kind of weakness to be for, let's say, anywhere from 4 to 8 weeks. After that, I would expect the uptrend to be resumed. Now, if let's say Apple does pull back to the 50-day moving average, it's not just Apple, but let's say the other stocks. Is that the end of this trend? In my view, no. The only way I would basically say that we are, the trend is changing is if I see technical damage on a higher time frame, such as the weekly or the monthly. If that doesn't happen, then I would expect any kind of pullback to be temporary in nature. But having said that, those would be the levels I would look out for. So on a hourly basis, if we look at Apple, so first level would be this level right here. So what number is that? That's around 190. And then the next level would be around 187 because that was the previous swing low. So those would be the levels I would keep an eye on. On the upside, this would be the first level I would watch. So this is around 192.50. And finally, this high right here, which is around 195. So those would be the upside 195, 192.50, downside 190, and then 187. So those would be the levels I would be keeping an eye on. So that's Apple. So let's move on to Microsoft. So just to speed things up, I'm just going to look at on an hourly basis just to see what are some of the levels we should be paying attention to. So this is Microsoft, the structure that's been forming. So since reaching this high right here, so this is 351.50. So you see that it has fallen to this level. And this level actually provided support recently in July. And from here, it started to move higher. Now, there's also this resistance right here, but it has taken this resistance, and on Friday, we see a test of this level. So this is going to be our near-term resistance, 351.50. We see rejection twice. Near-term level I would watch from a support point of view is this level, which is 342, because you can see that this level acted as resistance previously. So if there is a pullback, it could find support right here. Now, if this level is breached, then this level is of interest. This is 332.50, because you can see there's a gap. The gap closes at this level. You can also see that 352 was a support here, support right here. There was a support right here. So 352 would be the next level to watch. And finally, you're looking at these lows. So that's Microsoft, the levels to watch out for. And if 352 gets taken out, then obviously we'll have to look at a higher time frame just to see what are some of the levels. I mean, you can follow me on Twitter. I mean, I do provide update when I see something interesting. So this is my Twitter page. So if I see any levels to keep an eye on, I do mention that in my Twitter feed. So those would be the level for Microsoft. So NVIDIA, moving on to NVIDIA. Okay, so let's look at NVIDIA. NVIDIA spent quite a bit of time in this zone right here. So what are those levels? And then it broke out, it took out this area, which is 440, and then rose all the way to 480. So this is 480. And then we see it's pulling back. Now, oftentimes what you see is that when there is a breakout, you can see that you see stocks pulling back and retesting the breakout level. So if there's further pullback, first level I would watch is 440. So this was the previous high, and you can see that it also stopped here for a little while, and then there's a gap right here. So 440 would be the first level I would keep an eye on if there's any pullback. Now, obviously, the resistance would be the 480. Let's just give you the exact number. It's around just over 480. 480 on the upside, 440 the first level. The next level would be this one right here, because you can see that this area was a resistance, so it could also act as a support. This number is around 432. So 440, 432. If these two levels are breached, then we have to start looking at levels down here, which is around 415. But before 415 comes, I think the daily 20 EMA comes into play. So if I look at the daily chart, you can see that, on using the moving averages has provide support number of times, the daily 20 EMA, which is around 423 at the moment. So if there is any further pullback, I would expect this area to provide support as well, 422. So coming back to our levels, so 440, 432, 422, and then 415. So those would be the levels to keep an eye on the downside. And obviously on the upside, 481, because we have a rejection. Now, obviously before 481, we also have to consider this level right here, 465. So those would be the levels I would keep an eye on. But overall, there's nothing on a daily, weekly, monthly pattern that suggests that there is technical deterioration. You might say that this is overbought, but overbought doesn't mean that it's going to crash and burn. Overbought can remain overbought for a long period of time. But in terms of the levels, just watch for these levels. Okay, moving on to Amazon. So here's Amazon. So from a levels point of view, Amazon, if I look at the daily chart also, it's quite positive and constructive. You can see just like all of the big cap stocks, you can see that the stock has been rising. The moving averages, the daily 20 and 50 are also rising. More recently, it has bounced off the daily 20. So these moving averages are going to provide dynamic support. So coming back to the levels, hourly levels. So the first level, if there is any further pullback, look for this level right here, because Amazon had traded in this zone for some time. So this level is around 131.50, 131, 132, because you see there is a gap right here. So that would be the first level I would watch, between 130 and 132. That closes the gap. That also brings it to the breakout level, and then see whether it finds support. Now, if it does fall inside this zone again, then obviously this would be viewed as a failed breakout, and then we have to be open to the possibility of a move to this level, which is around 126. But I want to first wait and see whether there is a pullback and what the reaction is to this level, around 131, between 130 and 132 level. Now, on the other hand, so the resistance, the first area would be this level, which is 136.65. Let's call it 137, because there was a rejection at that level. So 137 on the upside, 130 to 132 on the downside, and below that, obviously we have other levels. The 126 being this low right here. So that's Amazon. Let's look at Google. So let's have a look at the hourly structure. We can look at the daily. They're pretty similar. On a daily basis, what do we see? What we see is that Google had a correction right here. It was on a downtrend, and then it bounced off, broke this downtrend. It has now gone above the daily 20 and 50 EMAs. So that's positive. From a daily point of view, I'm not seeing anything negative at this point. So that's, that's good. Coming back to the hourly chart. So from an hourly basis, so this was the previous high right here. On Friday, this is around 127. On Friday, it made an attempt to take out this level, failed. So this would be one level to see watch on the upside. So this is around 127. The other level is this one right here, which is around 130. So those would be the levels to keep an eye on the upside. And on the downside, the first level I would be watching is this level right here. So this is around 123.50. You can clearly see that there was a rejection right here. So 123, and then finally right here 121.50. There's also a gap right here. So those would be the levels I would keep an eye on. Overall, overall the daily chart looks positive. You can see that you can draw a downtrend right here, and the downtrend has been broken. So this is looking positive. So I want to see what the reaction is this level and at this level before I consider right here. And finally, you can see that this level provided support, which is around 117. So we'll get to 117, but I want to see if there's any pullback, what the reaction is in this zone. And on the upside, watch the 127 and 130 level. So that's Google. Let's look at AMD. So this is AMD. So AMD is quite interesting. It had a correction right here, and then and then it had risen to this level, which is around 118 level, and then pulled back. And then on Friday, it traded above this zone, but wasn't able to hold on to it. It fell back inside this zone now. So right now, it's now stuck back inside this zone. So this was a failed move. Nonetheless, this is worth keeping an eye on. So what are some of the levels we should be looking out for? So if there is any rebound, then obviously the first level I'm interested in is this level, because I can see that there was a rejection right here. So this is around 122, 122.50, just above 122. Above 122, the level I'm watching is around 125. So this, and finally this level around 129. So those would be the levels on the upside. On the downside, if it falls below 115, then this level 110 comes into play, and finally 107. So those would be the levels I would be watching, looking out for. I mean, it was definitely looking promising on Friday when it took out this level, but when the market sold off, AMD also pulled back and remain inside this zone. Now, if I look at AMD on a daily basis, just to see, AMD also went through a correction. You can see that after this big drop, this is the pattern it's beginning to form on a daily basis. So you can see that there's a higher, you can see that there's a higher low being formed. Now, it hasn't been able to close above this level. It was looking promising. It looked like it was going to form something like this. It hasn't happened, but this is not to say that it can't happen. So I'm watching to see whether it can take out this level. On an hourly basis, that's basically this level right here. Let me just have a look at it. What's the high there? 117. Yes. So on an hourly basis, it needed to close above this level right here. It wasn't able to do that because you can clearly see that the pattern was looking like this. But unfortunately, it wasn't able to close above this level. So it has now fallen below. It needs to close and then stay above this level for there to be a W pattern like this. W pattern is a bullish pattern, but it doesn't, mean that it can't happen next week. So, so I would look at the levels just to see what the reaction is, whether it can rebound and take out this level and remains above the 118 level, whether it pulls back and retests. If it pulls back, then 110, 107 would be the levels to look out for. So that's AMD. So let's look at Meta. So Meta has been on a very strong run up. If you look at the daily chart, you can see that, I mean, this thing is just straight up, it's just going through. Now, obviously, the daily 20 EMA is of interest because you can see touches. But since May, end of April, it hasn't touched the daily 20. So just to be aware of. So, can it pull back? Absolutely. Is that going to cause any kind of technical damage? I don't think so. Where is the daily 20 at the moment? It's around 291. It's around 291, but it's rising. So just to be, where did the price close at? It closed at just under 309. 309, the daily 20 is around 291. So even if it pulls back to 291, I don't see any technical damage. But let's have a look at the hourly chart just to see what kind of structure we see. So this is the most recent high. This is around 315. Let's just check it. It's around 316 right there. Now it had traded between these two levels previously. So this level is around 298 and this level is around 287. There's about 10 point. It traded inside this 10-point range for a while and then gapped up and then went all the way to 319. So if there's any further pullback, I'm looking at this gap right here between 298 and 300. So that would be, because 298 is this breakout level right here. So let me just remove the lines. You can clearly see 98. So if it does something like that, and then, so that would be a retest of this level. It's entirely possible for it to do that. But if it does that and falls underneath and gets back inside this channel, then obviously then this will come into play, which is around 287. The 287 number is just underneath the daily 20 EMA. Sometimes they can undercut a little bit, so I don't think that's necessarily a problem. So those would be the levels I would watch: 298 to 300 if there is any further pullback, and then 288, and then on the upside 316. So these would be the levels I would keep an eye on. But overall, even on an hourly basis, you can clearly see that it's been moving higher. You can see series of higher lows being formed. So I'm not seeing any kind of negative structure forming in Meta, but those would be the levels I'll keep an eye on. All right, so next come to Netflix. So Netflix, like Tesla reports earnings next Wednesday. So again, there could be a reaction to reaction after the earnings. Now, Netflix, it usually has a huge reaction. If you look at the previous earnings releases, you can see that the stock either jumps or drops significantly. Let's see. So right here, if you look at right here, you can see that after the earnings, the stock jumped quite a bit. Right here, and then right here also after the stock release earnings, it jumped. So it has it does move quite a bit. So just be aware of it. But in terms of levels, what are some of the levels? So on the downside, if there is a further pullback, watch this level. This is around 430. You can see that support right here, support right here. So those 430 acted as a support. Where is the resistance? Resistance is right here. This is 450. There was a rejection right here. Now it made an attempt to take out 450. Let me show you the line chart so you can actually see. So you can see that it rose as high as 450, but then got rejected. So the 450 is going to be the near-term resistance, and finally the intraday high of this level, which is around 456. So those would be the levels I would be watching. 430 is the near-term level, 450 on the upside, and 455. Those would be the levels I'd be keeping an eye on. But Netflix reports earnings, so I have no idea how the stock will react to the earnings, but those would be the levels I would be keeping an eye on. Well, I thank you very much for watching the video. I hope to see you again in a future video. If you like the content, please consider subscribing, sharing, liking, all of that good stuff. I hope to see you again in the future. Thank you very much.